In this video, we're having a very important interview with Dr. Patricia Worby, a former scientist. Now she works in healthcare, in helping people heal from emotions and how they affect the mind and body. So if this is of interest, stay tuned.
Well, yes. Hi, everyone. My name's Patricia Worby, and I'm a former health researcher. I used to work within university health research for 25 years. And then more recently, I gave up that role to become a self-employed therapist, educator, author. I'm basically now involved in helping people heal body states of anxiety and chronic sort of pain, chronic fatigue, anything that kind of mystifies the medical model and has no cure as such in conventional medicine. Because my belief is that a lot of the states come about through unfelt emotions. And I have witnessed that so many times now in the hundreds of people I've worked with. And you mentioned it earlier, actually, David, you know, something unfelt does not disappear. It goes somatically into the body and it creates all sorts of symptoms. So through my own experience of recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome, which is still regarded as a lifelong condition, I now help other people heal those states and get back to a healthy life. Sometimes in the best case scenario, I can do it in under 6 sessions. And in the worst case, I can do it within about 15 or 16 sessions. But compared to talk therapy, that is extraordinary. And compared to conventional approaches to managing symptoms, it's phenomenal. So I've got a few slides, which I'm happy to share. They're going to be a bit outside what you guys normally talk about, I think, because it's a bit more physiological than you're used to.
It's really, we're looking to build a whole picture. So okay. Very much what you've described there, Patricia, is something that very much our audience would have been exposed to already.
Right.
Because when we talk about the deep needs that we have, if we don't address those, then we get these emotions coming up. And those emotions really alarm bells, aren't they? They're signals.
They are.
We need to look at this. And that's why I think when we're looking for deeper solutions to where we are in the world right now, you know, as Ram Dass said, you know, yesterday, you know, I wanted to change the world. Today I became wise and I wanted to change myself. Because from these much better states, from these much calmer states, we can have so much more effect, particularly when we're talking to people. Mm-hmm. One of the things I really firstly discovered working on this project was if my state was angry or distorted with emotions in any way, people shut down straight away. Mm-hmm. If I was able to stay calm when they got angry, I was able to pull them back to calmness, because you can't have this mismatch of states. It just doesn't work. So yeah, so I think these emotions are going to be very, very useful, the things that you're going to discuss. So please feel free. I think I may need to make you a
co-host.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And
then I can share, yeah.
Yes. And
okay, unless I am already.
Okay, you're now a co-host.
Cool. Share screen.
So yes, so Patricia will go through these slides. We'll have a little bit of a chat and then we'll open up for Q&A.
Can everybody see?
Yes.
Thumbs up, yeah.
Perfect.
I'll make it full screen. Okay. So the subject tonight we discussed, David and I, was taking back control of the way we feel. And I think it's really important to emphasize the feeling states. Because anxiety and anxious states are not just mental. We tend to think of them that way because that's how they're treated in the medical sphere. You know, you think of having antidepressants or whatever to control it, but they originate actually in the body. Anxiety is a very somatic state, and it has a feedback loop via one of the most important nerves in your body, which is your vagus nerve, which you may well know about. which is part of your parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And so it really shows you, I mean, this diagram is hugely simplified, but it really shows you the two arms of the autonomic nervous system and how they have largely complementary effects on the various body organs. Now, interestingly, the only organ that doesn't have both is the adrenal gland, which is all completely sympathetic. And so emotions are not just feelings. This is a really important point. Why should emotions buried cause physical symptoms? Well, because they are physiological regulators. And so the solution to overwhelming feelings has to take into account both the mind and the body. You have to address both simultaneously. And what most of the people I work with have done is they've gone for the physical, they've changed their diet, they've maybe added in yoga or exercise of some kind, but very few of them have been willing to look at what they may have buried emotionally. And perhaps because they fear being overwhelmed and not being able to cope. And when you're already in a low energy state or feeling highly anxious, you become very fearful of your own feelings. So it can be a problem to persuade people that this is somewhere they need to go. And it was certainly the last piece of my puzzle, because I really didn't think I had a problem with anything that had happened to me emotionally, because I had learned to bury them very successfully. So I didn't consider I had an issue until I was so ill that I had to do something. And then it became very apparent that I had buried some stuff. So it was part of my healing as well. And the vagus nerve is really the one that I work with most often. I certainly work with a theory called Polyvagal Theory, which I'm going to briefly talk about. But it's key to rebalancing the system in total to promote these states of well-being. You can't persuade someone to feel better. You can't tell them to just think positively and that will be okay, and they'll somehow miraculously just wipe away anxiety, because this is a neurological imbalance and it's actually causing huge destruction of the systems of the body. Because the vagus nerve, you may know already, but the vagus is Latin for wanderer. It goes pretty much everywhere. It's both into the visceral organs, the heart, lungs, kidney, liver, and the gut, but it also has another branch that goes up into the head, neck, and face. It's around the larynx, the mouth, the ears, nose, and throat, basically, as well. So that's the innovation, but it's not brain to body, it's more body to brain, actually. It's a two-way street, but it's also, there's much more feedback from the body to the brain than there is the other way. And so when you're in anxious states, you will be getting this feedback from your gut or from other organs that are signaling that something's really, really wrong. And so trying to use just your brain to change that, just your thinking brain, doesn't really promote healing, because the problem isn't in the thinking brain, it's in your emotional brain, which is your limbic system. And so it's just important to understand that we have to work very holistically to uncover these effects. There's another diagram, and that's a more accurate diagram of the actual vagal nerve innervation. You'll see it goes down the side of the backbone and through the heart. In fact, it's really important in heart regulation. The liver, stomach, and the intestines as well. And so, as we know, many people are living in unbalanced states currently. Most of us, in fact, live pretty constantly in sympathetic dominance, which is a state of fight and flight, that kind of overwhelming feeling that you've got to be doing something, largely driven by this constant barrage of information that we're under. And there is no chance for our rest and digest system to operate. Even at night, we find that our brain is so stressed we are thinking, and it makes it very difficult to sleep well. And so we end up with this sort of tired but wired feeling. And it really affects the quality of our sleep, which thus affects how our body functions, because we do a lot of our clearance at night where the brain drains at night. And so the vagus nerve is really key to why we feel the way we do, whether it's doing well, whether it's balanced. We call that state vagal tone, and many people have lost their vagal tone, and so they're pretty much surviving on the sympathetic system with occasional forays into a third state, which I haven't mentioned yet, but is a second parasympathetic system called the freeze system, the freeze state. So when we feel anxious and wired, we can't make good decisions because our body is in this sort of stress state that's telling us that we need to run or we need to fight, which makes making an integrated decision very, very difficult. And it also affects, obviously, our digestion, and generally our whole body is in dysregulation. And polyvagal theory is kind of a fairly recent understanding. It's probably about 15, 20 years old, but in terms of research, that's really, really young. And it really hasn't filtered down yet to the medical system. But understanding that the two branches of your autonomic nervous system are not an on-off. They're not it's not like a thermostat. It's more like a hierarchy. And I've already mentioned that there's a second vagal system, the dorsal vagal, and that's, if you conceive of it as a ladder. And I think the colors here, the sort of traffic light colors, are also a useful way of remembering. It's basically green at the top, which is your ventral vagal. This is the one that we're using right now. You're listening to my voice. It's fairly prosodic. You know, I'm looking at you, I'm smiling, I have soft eye gaze. But if I change my voice or I go really flat, it changes the way your brain interprets what I'm saying. And a lot of people that I work with grew up with parents who had no emotional empathy, or they were depressed, or they were shut down in some way. And so they didn't get social cues of safety, which is the ventral vagal. And it's very interesting because it's a mammalian system that came in to allow, or primate, in fact, it's a development of the mammalian system, but it's particularly for primates where the offspring are born quite immature and they need maternal care. And so the ventral vagal was a later evolutionary development encouraging parental care by these kind of bonding between mother and child. And so, you know, the voice prosody and the touch and the eye gaze are interpreted by this system as whether the child is safe or not. And as I say, for a lot of my clients, that never came online. And so all they've got instead are these other two states, which is sympathetic, fight and flight, wired but tired, or the dorsal vagal, which is the second one, which kind of tends to create frozen, numb, dissociated states, a complete absence of joy. And I don't know if any of you know people who've got kind of chronic fatigue syndrome or some of these long-term conditions where there's no hope. But the complete absence of joy is a really big feature. And they feel basically they're in a living death in a way. It's a hugely big problem. And the reason that they end up this way is it's manyfold, obviously, but largely from past experience, usually childhood connection before the age of 7. The kind of attachment was not reliable in some way. Then there's usually some trigger in the adult life that kind of reminds the body of past experience and sets the usual patterns of neurological wiring in place. And so people get triggered by maybe having a viral infection. We've seen that with long COVID recently, an awful lot of fatigue states there. It could be the loss of a relationship, which it was for me. It could be loss of financial security. There's all sorts of things that can trigger you, but because they're basically reminding the body of previous experiences that were overwhelming for that person. And so you exist in this kind of frozen state, and occasionally you feel really anxious, and then you collapse again, and that's kind of how it works. But we need to obviously encourage people to move up the ladder into the ventral vagal, if at all possible, and there are ways to do that. And so what we have to do is change their state. And as I've already hinted at, that's not about thinking positively or just figuring things out. I have a lot of people who've done a lot of therapy before they come and see me. You know, they're highly motivated. They are usually very intelligent. They've read all the stuff. They know lots of things, but thinking things hasn't really changed the way they feel, because the emotions are the key thing that they haven't really engaged with. And in fact, I still hear of people going into therapy where they get asked to talk over and over and over again about the trauma that they've suffered if they've had a very overt trauma, which can be very re-traumatizing. It's really the opposite to what you need to do. Talking about it does not actually solve it. And in fact, it can make things worse, because it conflicts with what the body is telling you, which is, I'm not safe, I'm not safe. And you are saying, well, just talk about this thing that happened to you that was really awful, is just going to obviously heighten all the feelings. So we really have to say that kind of approach, as helpful as it is for some issues, is not really the approach for anything that has manifested traumatically. And I think somatic work is really the key. So what we're trying to do is change the feedback body to brain, because it's an awful lot quicker than trying to get the brain to change the body. And I have also found much longer lasting. You know, once I help people to resolve their emotions, they never go back. It's almost impossible. There may be other aspects to the situation that we're working with that may need working through, but you can't go backwards. Once you resolve it, it's over as far as your limbic brain is concerned. So the state changes actually happen faster, and they are more permanent. And how we do that, very basically, I mean, I'm happy to answer questions if anybody is interested in the real detail of how this works. But allowing someone to come into body awareness or emotional awareness, or both. Now, some people don't feel their bodies, quite honestly. They have no connection with them. I'll ask them what they're feeling, and they'll say, I don't know. But most people will be able to tell you, if you ask them, you know, where is there tension in your body, or have you got any sensation anywhere? And they'll be able to tell me maybe their gut is clenching, or they've got a pain in the shoulders or something. It doesn't really matter, because the body state is the readout of the emotion that they're repressing. So either way, you're going to get them to connect with what they have been not dealing with. But the important difference between them trying to do this themselves and working with me or someone else is being witnessed in the presence of another who does not judge them. So a safe other, somebody who doesn't react as if that's a shameful thing that they've just said or felt, doesn't try and compete with them, doesn't try and kind of brush it off as not important, but is just present for them while they allow themselves to feel. That, for me, is the key to getting back into this neurological regulation. And so it's both acceptance of where you've been and how you learnt to be, and compassion for what you had to do to survive. And these are the two antidotes to shame, to that kind of shame is a body experience. It's not a thought. It's a sense of I'm not enough. I am somehow to blame. I am not good enough in some way. So that's kind of basically the approach. And how I do that, I was saying to David, I don't have just one thing that I'm not a solo therapist who just has one thing and she just does that. I've learned quite a wide range of different modalities, but I've sort of come down to about 3 or 4 now that I find consistently work with the widest range of people. And I guess EFT, which I'm sure you know all about, is one of my main ones, the tapping. I do it obviously with the person and allow them to feel what they're feeling. And it's just so different for most people who've had, CBT, usually, to actually come into connection with their body while they're being witnessed by me, and we're exploring it together so they don't feel alone with their feelings. And I've shortened it hugely from the original EFT script. I do something called faster EFT, which is just tapping in the feeling. And I get great results with that. I also love havening, which isn't too dissimilar in that it uses touch as well whilst connecting with feelings, but it's more of a stroking movement. So there's either down the arms, or you can do the face, or sometimes you can just do the hands, but certainly when I'm working with people, I mostly use down the arms. And again, eye gaze is really important as you're working with people, so that they can kind of see that you are witnessing them and they don't have to sort of lower their eyes because they're full of shame about the way they are. So it helps to kind of bring into connection with me and the client. The full havening protocol, not many people have used havening, but it's very well researched. Ronald R. Rudin wrote a book called When the Past is Always Present. I think that's the title. He developed the havening protocol, but some of the protocol actually uses eye movements and counting backwards and all those kind of NLP type things. And eye movements are actually very interesting way of actually promoting this kind of reconnection in the brain. And EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, bit of a mouthful, is probably my third rung, if you like, on the ladder. It's the very precise tool for memory, so implicit memory. And basically then you ask the person to connect with something that happened to them. Everybody has a certain number of core memories in their life, and they're not always the most obvious memories. They're not always the biggest things that happened, but they are the things that had the most meaning to that person. And getting them to just focus on one memory whilst asking them to move their eyes, you basically move your fingers across a screen, or you can, if you're in person, do it with sound, or you can do it with touch as well. It's a bilateral stimulation, basically. But online, which is the way I work most of the time now, I use just fingers moving across the screen and get them to follow my fingers with their eyes whilst connecting with the feelings. And EMDR is one of those slightly bizarre tools that you can't imagine would work, but really, really does work. It is extraordinary and can resolve in minutes something that you've lived with your whole life. And I watch, honestly, as people change state in front of me from shut down, afraid, shameful, into a new state of being. And I kind of call it coming home, because it's like coming home to their bodies for the first time. So those are the 3 main ones I use. I also use aspects of hypnotherapy, and I'm a licensed hypnotherapist as well. And I won't go into that today because it's not so much what I use, but there are other tools. I mean, I know David uses Sedona method, and there's acceptance and commitment therapy, and there's something called Psych K, which is based on kinesiology. There are so many I could list here that work. But it's not so much the tool, but it's the connection that counts. It's that ventral vagal connection that you are making one-on-one with someone. And that's why it's usually a lot easier working with someone else, in this case, a therapist, than trying to do this on your own. And because we can not only witness what's happening to you, bring your frontal cortex online, allow you to see what's going on and actually kind of connect with it, but we can also call you out of your usual patterns of denial or dismissal, overthinking and rationalization. You know, the things that people say to themselves, well, it was a long time ago, it doesn't really matter, I should be over it by now, all of those kinds of things. It was nothing. It's just like, no, it wasn't nothing, because your body is telling me it was really important to you. So it's a way of kind of helping people to come into connection with the reality rather than the story they've told themselves. And so it helps the person to accept their emotions without judgment. And that's really, really key. Because if they try and do that with their loved ones, even the most well-meaning partner or parent is going to have some judgment about what that person is expressing. And so to have this impartial witness is just major, really. I'm sure you all know this, but just to reiterate, changing our energy is what you're actually doing here, that thoughts are energy, feelings are energy. And much of who we are is a pattern of unconscious perceptions. Perception's really key here, what we believe happened to us, what the meaning was for us. And the beliefs that we formed around what happened to us and the behaviors that run from those beliefs. So if I believe I am responsible for somebody else's pain, I am going to have people-pleasing behaviors, or I'm going to try and overwork to make up for that deficit that I believe I have. So the behaviors definitely come from the beliefs, which come from the perceptions. And we download these perceptions and beliefs unconsciously from the people we grew up around, and we don't get to choose that. As you said, David, we kind of have to deal with what parents we get. And so I believe the most effective therapy is one which changes these unconscious programs of who we believe ourselves to be, the false self, as I call it, into, you know, a much more realistic true self who has connection and knows what this body wants. And so we're changing the energy around who we actually are. And so I always say to people when they're working with me, we're not just going to get rid of your symptoms, we're going to find out who you really are, and we're going to work with you to uncover your true self. And they sort of look at me like that sounds an awful lot, but it is really a journey to connection. We need to rewire the limitations that we have, you know, around the beliefs we have, you know, what we can and can't do. And so rewriting this old program with new neural rewiring is what I'm witnessing when I'm doing the various tools that comes about almost instantly. It's within milliseconds of having that safe connection with another, which is what Polyvagal Theory terms neuroception. So that safe connection is absolutely vital. And that's the beauty of these interpersonal therapies, because our interpersonal neurobiology, in other words, our wiring that tells us whether we're safe or not, is dependent on this connection with another person. We aren't born with a nervous system that knows ourselves until we know ourselves in relation to someone else. And so we are designed to learn this kind of internal sense of safety through energetic connection with another. And so changing the emotional energy when we feel safe is possible, and releasing anything that's actually stuck in our bodies. And when we do that, all the symptoms fall away, and they really do. It doesn't happen instantly. The body lags a little, but it will happen within weeks and occasionally months, but sometimes within days, which is really remarkable. And so this is my final slide. Healing is an inside job. When we heal ourselves, however, we heal all those that are emotionally connected with us. So there's ripples in a pond. And we learn, therefore, that we are whole, and we can have a more connected and integrated and consensual approach to ourselves. You know, I often say my body and I are a team now, and we sometimes tap that in, and people are amazed and astonished because their body responds. We're a team now. It hears that, and it changes the state of that person hugely, because they've been at war with their bodies usually all their lives. And we learn we have power. It's power within, rather than power over. It's not about fixing anything. It's that we are whole, we just forgot, and we make ourselves whole by coming into alignment with that. And therefore, this is the true meaning of healing, which is becoming whole, which is holism. So I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you.
Brilliant, Patricia. Thank you very much for that. Someone in the chat put, this talk is gold, and I think I echo that. It's rarely that I'll see a presentation that will be exactly along the same lines as my thoughts and thinking. I think that really was.
Cool.
One thing I think that's really powerful to add is when you were talking about the people that were numb to their emotions, you know, and that's really the thing. They're there. They're just not tuned into them, or really. And this reminds me of what I was reading in Blink, which is one of Malcolm Gladwell's books, when he was talking about the food tasters. So they not that I drink any sodas, but they were showing how when they do the Coke and Pepsi challenge, people can generally guess, but when they have 3 of them, people can't distinguish them because they can't store that information because they're not used to it. They don't have the distinctions. Yet the food tasters can, because they're so practiced at creating these distinctions. It's a bit like a wine taster. For me, wine is good or bad, but yet the wine taster will give you all these variations. And that's really, it's learning a language, isn't it? It's learning the distinctions of
the distinctions, yes.
Yeah. So how one emotion feels different from another.
Yes.
And a lot of those, obviously, you know, from, I forget his name now, but they're coded in the facial expressions.
Yes, they are, yeah.
You know, so this is really a worthwhile thing, and it's really an emotional intelligence, isn't it? That when you reconnect with the body, it's like coming alive again, isn't it?
It totally changes the way they feel. And interestingly, what you said about what's written on the face, it turns out I grew up with a highly anxious mother, and that gave me a great window into how to do anxiety, and I'm extremely good at it. My body knows exactly where to go, it knows how to feel. It's just, I'm brilliant at anxiety. But on the plus side, it gave me a really excellent ability to notice a fleeting emotion on someone else's face. Yeah. And I can pick it up within literally a millisecond, a flash of anger, a flash of shame, a flash of, I don't know, overwhelm. Yeah. And I will say, something just came in there. What was it? And that brings the cortex online. And then they're starting to go, well, either they might not know. And I'll say, it looked a little like rage to me. Yeah. And then they can go in and go, oh, actually, yeah, my jaw's really tight and my stomach's clenched. And so I'm kind of teaching them to interpret what that is. And as you say, it's all about noticing, making the neural connection. That is what rage feels like. And then the next time you have it, you absolutely know the difference between rage and joy, you know, or rage and bewilderment, you know. So
exactly, you're reconnected into it. Yeah, it's really a lovely learning experience. Well, I tell you what I'd like to do, actually, I'll send you a couple of papers that a gentleman that I met at the Better Way conference, Matt Hudson, they had a couple of papers published on actually the pictures that create split second learning. So I think there'd be some really fun things to, fun's not really the word, but really to explore this, to really, I find it very fascinating. So I'm going to open up for questions. Echo my gratitude as well, Patricia, because I think this is such an important subject that, you can't really help heal the world unless we're healing ourselves. You know, we've got to have energy, we've got to have sleep, we've got to be balanced, we've got to be able to be calm in conversations. And as you rightly pointed out, it's somatic. You know, these things, like, you don't decide to feel these things. You don't sit there and go, oh, I'm going to feel angry. It rises from the body. So yeah, very fair. So Judith has a question, and if anyone else wishes to ask Patricia a question, please feel free to pop your hand up and then I will call you to ask. So Judith, please feel free.
Hi, thank you, Patricia. That was really fascinating, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know whether it's so much a question, but maybe you might see some questions that arise. I did have a very traumatic childhood, and when I was an early adult, I sort of like had words with myself and said, you know, you've got these things that have happened to you can make you stronger or weaker, and I decided that they would make me stronger. But when I had one of the things, my mother had a personality disorder, and I don't know whether you know, but that means that a lot of lies are told about you and other people believe the lies, and it's just traumatic. And so when I don't cope well when people don't believe me, and I had quite a bad medication reaction, and the doctors, nobody believed me. They kept thinking that I had a stress disorder or a depression, and it was actually a drug reaction. So this caused me to actually have a lot of pain down the left side of my body, and fibromyalgia and my facial pain syndrome, from which I actually did cure myself. And I'm just listening to what you've said. One of the things that I did, I went to some meditation classes and learned to meditate. And the other thing that I did was a massage course, and I actually massaged the parts of my body that which I mean, fits in exactly with the things that you're talking about. And although I did it on my own and it took a lot longer, I can see that what I was doing was actually fitting in, and it also meant that I became much more. I actually took over my own healthcare from doctors, and I sort of like took control of it, and I've been in control of my own healthcare since. And that doesn't mean to say that I haven't had traumatic moments, but my experience, I didn't know what I'd done, but actually listening to you now, it seems as if what I did was what you were recommending, but I found the route myself.
Well, you're one of the rare ones, I have to say. Really, truly, you were guided. I mean, one of the things I found in my healing was I went and had massage, and it was one of the most extraordinary things, because I was disconnected from my body, and to be connected again was such a shock, but it was so super healing. So you've obviously found a way forward, by chance or luck or insight or intuition. I don't know.
I think,
but you know.
So the fact that I lost faith in medicine, which possibly you had as well, conventional medicine.
It's the first step. I don't want to be too controversial, but it's the first step for many people, is to come up against the medical model that says you have created your own problem, or it's all in your head, or you're just depressed, which is what I was told. I was on multiple medications for a long time and just felt horrendous on it. Like you, I had severe drug reactions, which is a very common, by the way, with highly sensitive people. That's another bit that I couldn't talk about, but we do have drug reactions that most people won't have, and then we're disbelieved. I used to see auras around people when I was on some of the antidepressant medications, and I told my GP, you know, I'm seeing auras around people, and he said, that's impossible. So, you know, but then he checked it, and it was 10% of people. So I'm just that 10%. Sorry, I have a rather sick animal here. Go on. Go on.
That is, it's very interesting. You hear so many stories from massage therapists where they'll just be massaging someone and they just burst into tears.
Indeed.
You know, they're just moving things, aren't they, Patricia?
So another interesting story for me was how I got into this, because I never woke up one morning and decided to be a trauma therapist either. You know, that just wasn't part of my game plan. I was a research scientist, that's what I did. But because I got ill and then I had massage and it helped me so much, I decided to train as a massage therapist just for my family and friends and, you know, whatever. And then I thought, well, I could, you know, I could offer it to a few people. And I had a lady come to have treatment with me, and she just had this massive reaction, which was like a trauma reaction. And I was completely unprepared for that. They don't teach you that in massage school, I can promise you. And, you know, she started spontaneously bleeding from the nose and choking, and she was clearly not with me. She was somewhere else. And that was the trajectory for me to find out what on earth this was about and to learn about trauma.
Brilliant.
And we did.
I'm actually just going to stop recording.